Okay, so I'm just going to do, as quick as I can, an analysis of Anthem for Doomed Youth. So as you'll notice straight away, it's a relatively short poem in comparison to Dolce especially. And it's one of the poems that's been on the HFC list for quite a long time. So there's quite a bit of information out there about it as well. But I'm just going to go through it as quickly as I possibly can when talking about Wilfred Owen without getting too excited. All right, so when we start with our title, Anthem for Doomed Youth, there's a few things going on here. The first thing that you'll notice is this doomed youth. So you've got like an oxymoron here, or a contrast between the two, because you don't usually associate the word doomed with youth. Youth is usually hopeful and optimistic, I suppose, or innocent. But in this, you've got these doomed words. So here, I suppose, Owen's sort of pointing to like the fact that essentially the future of these people's lives has already been written without them really having any say in it. The other really important thing to notice is this word anthem. Obviously, anthems are usually like a joyous, a joyous thing, so something to celebrate. But obviously, from what you know about Owen, you'd know that this is probably not the case in these poems. So there's a little bit of an irony that's going on here. Okay, so when we move on to the actual first stanza, straight away we're given a rhetorical question. So what passing bells for these who die as cattle? So again, there's a number of things going on here. The most important, significant one that you can probably write a little bit about is this simile here for those who die as for these who die as cattle. And obviously here Owen's making the comparison between the soldiers and the idea of being cattle. So here it's quite a negative image, and I suppose what he's sort of pointing to is the fact that these soldiers, essentially, there's no value for life given to these soldiers, and they essentially are just a number, someone who's used in battle, and then if they're killed, so what? There's more people. So it really shows Owen's sort of anger at the governments who aren't actually thinking about the magnitude of what they're doing in the war. Also here, I just want to point out the passing bells, because passing bells is like when someone dies, there's bells, and you'll notice throughout, as we talk about, there's a lot of religious imagery going on in this. And if you think about futility, you might be able to make some connections there. So when it says what passing bells for these who die as cattle, so you've got a rhetorical question here. But what Owen is essentially saying is that there is no time for these people in war to have that morning to have those passing bells. Okay, so what passing bells for these who die as cattle? So there is none of that. The only thing that there is only the monstrous anger of the guns. So here in this line, or in the first two lines, you've got that idea of religion and grieving being replaced with the sounds of war and the immediacy of war. Also in this line, you've got monstrous anger of the guns. So you've got this personification here, and the word monstrous is a very interesting word choice, and anger is an interesting word choice because it's giving those guns like these very negative connotations, and it's like they're acting without the soldiers even actually realizing, like it's without them doing it, because I suppose they just do what they have to in war, because they're cattle, they just do what they're told. So the monstrous anger of the guns. In the next two lines, I'm going to talk about these next two lines together, because it says, only the stuttering rifles rapid rattle can patter out their hasty orisons. So a few things that are going on here. Orisons is to do with like prayer. So again, you've got this religious imagery, but they're hasty orisons. So similar to Dolce, when in the moment of the battlefield, you kind of just have to move on from death really quickly and just, accept that death is happening and keep going. And it's like it doesn't even really affect you. So they're hasty orisons. So the hasty way that the other soldiers have to grieve these people who die there. The other really clever thing that's done here is you've got rifles rapid rattle. So you've got some alliteration going on here with the r sound. But you've also got this t and then a t and then a t sound. So stuttering, rattle, and patter. When you put these together, only the stuttering, rapid rattle can patter out their hasty orison. So you've got this real like staccato noise, like a noise. So in here you've got essentially alliteration plus consonants, which is the T sounds that are going on there, and they sort of join together to make this onomatopoeia sound. So it's almost like you're hearing those noises of the battlefield, that constant like gunfire, that so here Owen is replacing all of these sounds of mourning and loss and reverence with all of these things that have to happen in war. So no mockeries now for them, nor bells, nor no prayers, nor bells, nor any voice of mourning save the choirs. Okay, so again, you've got this religious imagery here. So no mockeries now for them, no prayers, nor bells. So all these people who die in war, there's no time to respect the dead. Okay, so there's no prayers, there's no bells, there's no voice of mourning. Okay, when it says save the choirs, that means accept the choirs. Okay, so nor any voice of mourning, so no one's mourning them, save the choir, so accept the choir. So that doesn't actually sound like what you'd expect, because we're hearing that there is no time for mourning, especially from choirs. But then in the next line, Owen juxtaposes this really sort of nice imagery of mourning of the choirs, but he points out that they're the shrill, demented choirs of wailing shells. So the shells are about gun shells, like all those sounds of battle are going on, that wailing. So the wailing is obviously the noise that the shells are making, but also you can associate wailing with that idea of mourning and someone being extremely upset about something, obviously in this case death. But they're shrill, demented choir. So that's a really interesting juxtaposition between like choir and then shrill and demented choir that Owen is using to again just show like the lack of reverence and the lack of respect, I suppose, for life and remembrance during war. And bugles calling them from sad shires. So the bugles obviously are like when you hear the last post, they're something that is traditionally associated with remembrance and reverence. So there's the mourning that's happening from the choirs of the wailing shells and bugles calling them sad shires. So this is the first time that we kind of hear about Owen talking about the home front. So from sad shires. So shires is a reference to England and like the areas in England where all of these people are mourning the loss of their soldiers or their loved ones during war. Okay, so you'll notice that we're about to move on to the second stanza, and between the first stanza and the second stanza you have a sort of a shift in place. So the first stanza is very much about the battlefield, whereas the second stanza here is about the home front. And I suppose you're getting a hint of that in that sad shires bit. So what candles may be held to speed them all? So again, you've got a rhetorical question. So you've got rhetorical questions starting at the start of both of these stanzas. So what candles may be held to speed them all? So the them is obviously the soldiers who were in war. Speed them all. So that could be about the idea of bringing them home. And again, candles, you've got this religious imagery going on. Not in the hands of eyes, but in their eyes. Sorry, not in the hands of boys, but in their eyes shall shine the holy glimmer of goodbyes. Okay, so this shine the holy glimmer of goodbyes in their eyes is about the tear and the sadness of people at home, and that's all they can do. Okay, so they're just upset, and that's the only way that these men are remembered during the war. So shall shine the holy glimmer of goodbye. So again, you've got religious imagery going on here. The pallor of girls' brows shall be their pall. So there's a few words that I just want to unpack for you here. Pall is like a pallbearer. Like that's probably where you'll have heard this word before. So it's like that to do with death and grieving and support. So pallbearers are the ones who carry coffins on their shoulders or maybe carry them with their hands during a funeral. So the pallor of girls' brows. So this is about the pallor of girls' brows is about like the paleness of them and like there's like almost like the sweatiness and the distress of their brows. Okay, so like up here. The pallor of girls' brows shall be their pall. So the only way that these men are going to be remembered are by those who grieve them at home. Their flowers, the tenderness of patient minds. So the tenderness of patient minds is probably those who are waiting for them to come home. And again, you've got the flowers. Obviously, when someone dies, the idea of remembrance, you send flowers. So you've got a lot of funeral, death, religious imagery going on here. And each slow dusk a drawing down a blind. So there's a few ways that I've seen this interpreted, but the way that I interpret it is the idea that like a drawing down of blinds is like when people are in mourning, they tend to draw their blinds to indicate to other people that they're in mourning, maybe not so much now, but in those times. And it says in each slow dusk a drawing down of blinds, so it's like it's happening again and again and again. And there's, like whole towns are being affected by it. And there's all these people at home who are really concerned about it. But on the battlefield, they don't have time to be concerned about it. And definitely the people who are in charge are not concerned about it because there's no time for remembrance for these who die as cattle. Okay, so for these who are essentially just sent into war to be slaughtered. So they're not sent into war with the hope of them coming back, that they are, in fact, doomed youth. The last thing that I want to point out to you, and I'm very proud of myself because I did that poem in 12 minutes, sort of, because I'm going to keep going. The last thing that I want to point out to you is the structure of this poem. So if you look at this poem, in this stanza here, you've got 8 lines, and in this stanza here, you've got 6 lines. So you've got a 14-line poem altogether. You have a really specific rhyme structure. So you've got A, B, C, D, and then you've got E, F, E, G. If you don't know what that means, you can ask myself or Mr. Conway what that means when I was going through those letters just there. So you've got a really specific rhyme structure here, and pretty much all of the lines of this poem have around about the same amount of syllables. So you've got what passing bells for these who die as cattle, so 11. Only the monstrous anger of the guns, you've got 10. Only the stuttering rifles rapid rattle, you've got 11. Can patter out their hasty orisons, you've got 10. So you've got around about 10 syllables in each line. So this is a really, really structured poem. It's actually in the form of a sonnet, which is probably one of the most structured poems in terms of the rules that you need for a poem to be a sonnet. So I suppose you could talk about that in the idea of like the military and structure possibly, but I think what's more important is that sonnets were usually used as a expression of love and celebration. So again, you come back to this idea of anthem. So they're usually used as this expression of love and happiness. And I suppose what Owen's doing is there's an irony in him using this as like a celebration, because usually I suppose people, especially in these times, are celebrated as having this romantic view of war and it's all going to be fantastic, and then the reality is that it's the opposite of this. So I think Owen is using this this structure to really point out the difference between what people thought it was going to be like, so this romantic celebration filled time, versus the reality of it, which is where we see this anthem for doomed youth and all this religious imagery and time for mourning being replaced by gunfire and a lack of respect and reverence for human life. So that is Anthem for Doomed Youth, and I did it in under 15 minutes. Woohoo!